The myth of Prometheus is one of the most profound and psychologically rich stories in Greek mythology. At its surface, it tells of a titan who defies the gods, steals fire from Olympus, and gives it to humanity, an act that grants us the gift of civilization, intellect, and self-determination. But from a Jungian and depth psychological perspective, Prometheus is far more than a rebellious hero. He is an archetype of the evolving human consciousness, the bearer of light into darkness, and the tragic symbol of the suffering that often accompanies transformation. Prometheus is the archetype of the cultural hero, the one who brings a higher form of awareness to a world still governed by instinct and nature. In stealing fire, he not only disobeys the gods, he breaks a divine boundary and brings the creative spark of the divine into mortal hands. Fire, in this myth, represents far more than physical warmth or technological power. Psychologically, fire is the light of consciousness, the capacity for reflection, for insight, and for the symbolic imagination. In this sense, Prometheus is the one who awakens the latent potential of the human psyche. Carl Jung was deeply interested in myths, like that of Prometheus, because he believed they gave symbolic expression to psychological realities. In Jung's terms, Prometheus is the figure who dares to confront the unconscious order of things, the dominant archetypal powers, and bring something new into being. He is the symbol of ego consciousness striving toward the self, even at the cost of immense suffering. Jung once said, "The development of consciousness requires the most intense and ruthless effort, and the fire stolen by Prometheus is a symbol of consciousness gained against the will of the gods." This is not merely an act of defiance. It is an evolutionary necessity. Humanity is propelled forward by those moments when consciousness breaks through into new territory, when the ego dares to stand apart from collective norms and divine authority. But Prometheus does not act without consequence. As punishment, Zeus chains him to a rock, and each day an eagle eats his liver, which regenerates overnight. This image is brutal, yet deeply symbolic. In Jungian terms, the punishment reflects the cost of individuation, the painful process by which one separates from the unconscious, faces the consequences of awareness, and bears the wound of having seen more than one was meant to. The liver, in ancient thought, was associated with passion, vitality, and the life force. To have it devoured daily is to suffer the eternal consequences of having brought the light of awareness into a world that resists it. Yet it is precisely through this suffering that Prometheus becomes more than a thief of fire. He becomes a martyr of consciousness. He embodies the archetype of the wounded healer, the one who is punished not for his evil, but for his vision. This is where Prometheus intersects with Jung's concept of the shadow. In daring to bring fire to humanity, Prometheus acts out of both light and darkness. He disobeys, deceives, and breaks the natural order, traits we often associate with the shadow. Yet his motive is deeply altruistic, perhaps even divine. Jung writes, "The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality, for no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort." Prometheus, then, is a figure who embraces the shadow side of rebellion, deceit, and trickery not for selfish gain, but for the sake of enlightenment. He reflects the psychological truth that true transformation often requires a descent into morally ambiguous terrain. The myth also speaks to the archetype of the trickster, a figure who disrupts, breaks rules, and introduces change. While the trickster is often portrayed as chaotic or foolish, in Prometheus we see a more evolved version, a trickster who acts with foresight, whose name literally means forethought. He is not impulsive but prophetic. His fire is not the fire of destruction, but of creativity. This dual nature, divine gift and eternal punishment, mirrors the dual nature of human consciousness itself. To be awake is to carry both the blessing and the burden of awareness that in many ways. The Promethean myth anticipates the story of modern human development. In psychology, science, and art, we have stolen fire again and again, breaking taboos, challenging institutions, redefining morality. But with each breakthrough comes the Promethean wound, the anxiety of alienation, the terror of too much knowledge, the endless questioning of meaning. As Jung notes, Enlightenment is not imagining figures of light, but making the darkness conscious. Prometheus forces us to see that the light we seek often comes wrapped in pain, responsibility, and exile. In the broader symbolic context. Prometheus also prefigures the Christ archetype, a being who suffers for the sake of humanity, who is bound, pierced, and resurrected. Both figures illustrate the principle that true transformation requires sacrifice, and that the bearer of light must often endure the loneliness of the visionary. The difference lies in their orientation. Christ suffers to redeem sin. Prometheus suffers to elevate awareness. Both are messianic in the deepest sense of the term. Today, the Promethean myth remains as relevant as ever. In a world driven by technological fire, artificial intelligence, and unchecked knowledge, we must ask ourselves, are we prepared to bear the ethical and psychological weight of the fire we've inherited? Have we integrated the consciousness we've acquired, or are we still chained to our own rocks of unresolved shadow? Ultimately, the myth of Prometheus is not just about rebellion. It is about responsibility. It reminds us that every act of awakening comes with a price, but also with the possibility of freedom, creativity, and wholeness. To carry the fire is to carry the burden of becoming fully human. And in this journey, Prometheus walks beside us, not as a god, but as the eternal symbol of the conscious soul.